All right, we're recording.
All righty.
All right, so we're back with Seth. Seth, I apologize for last week. We got cut a little short, and I didn't hit the record button when me, you, and Brad kicked it back off. So there was a lot of really good information that I wanted to get back out there, and I appreciate you doing this twice. So welcome back, and I appreciate it. How are things going? Anything new come up this week?
Oh, not much. Just been up at Mycko this week. Got a vegetation project up there we've been working on. So we've been planting water willow up at Mycko and some eelgrass and some water lily. But that project's only about 3 years old now, so we got a ways to go there at Mycko.
How long does it typically take for it to, I guess, take hold and start to spread? Is it different for different lakes based on nutrient levels, et cetera? Turtle, apparently we learned last week, turtle residents, how many turtle population?
That's right. Yeah, turtles really put a hurting on us sometimes. And we've seen about 12 years is when we really start to notice things persisting from year to year, and where we don't really have to go back in and touch these sites as much. So it's taken us about 12 years at Oak Hollow to get to that point where we're almost hands off at a lot of those sites now.
Yeah, that's really taken off.
Willow, the stuff that's outside of the exclosures and just growing on sandy points and stuff, that's been a lot quicker. It's been about 5 to 7 years where we can really see that start to get going and spreading on its own.
Now, when you survey a lake and you decide where you're going to start to attempt to grow vegetation, I mean, what do you take into account to make your decisions?
Yeah, so we really we're looking for willing partners these days. So anytime we can get a city manager or someone to really work with us, that's been great to have their help. So that's been good, and we're really looking into some of the lakes that don't have anything above them. It seems where we get a lot of nutrient flow into the lake straight from a river. The plants seem to take hold a lot better versus
sense.
Towns and where they're third in the string, there's a bunch of dams upstream, there's not as much growth there. But the substrate at Townsend, anywhere we get that hard red clay, we really struggle to grow plants. So those lakes that have a lot of that, those red clay banks, they seem to be not as good as lakes where you can get a lot of the mucky habitat.
Yeah, it's like my front yard is full of rocks and red clay, and I can't grow grass, but my backyard has, it's mushier and it's got more nutrients in it, I assume. So my grass grows just fine, and it's got shade. So
so the more that flows in, it seems the better it is.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think where we left off last week, I was just listening, and we were talking about wastewater, nutrients in the water. We're talking about how oxygenators, are in some of our lakes. I think there's one in Reedsville, there's one in Oak Hollow. I'm not sure what other lakes that it's in, but I've noticed that those bubblers, obviously, you can forward-facing sonar, you can look at those bubblers and you can see the amount of bait and fish that are actually attracted to that oxygen in the water. And especially this time of the year when the water temperature tends to get, over 80, 85 degrees. But you notice that it has like a certain kind of tannic color. And I know that lakes that don't have oxygenators right now, there's a big thermocline at about 15, depending on the lake. A lake we fished last weekend, it was about 15 feet, and it Randleman's about 15 feet too. So is that why you start to see that tannic color? Is it starting to push some of the stuff off the bottom?
Yeah, a little bit. So it's bringing a lot of that deep water up with them bubbles. So that's helping just mix the water more. And you're not seeing a lot of the algae at the surface. So, the more that water mix, the less algae you'll have.
Yeah.
It'll just have more of that dark water color to it and green.
And is that the main reason why the certain fisheries have those oxygenators in them, is to avoid the type of algae bloom and, basically less maintenance on the water?
Yeah, a lot of those algae can develop like, a taste and odor in the final drinking water. So they're trying to cut down on that. That's why you like city water supply lakes and less than just recreational lakes, or larger lakes, a lot more expensive to do. So
yeah. Yeah. So we're talking about wastewater and the nutrients and, some of the water qualities in certain locations. And we are talking about how that kind of coordinates with fish health and fish life and, how hardy the fish are. And can you kind of elaborate on that and kind of give some examples of some of the different fisheries in our area and some that are, give an example of some that are high in nutrients and some that are low in nutrients and, what we can do or what can be done to manipulate that and change it and make it so it's all so we have higher nutrients in our fisheries.
Yeah, I don't think there's any plans to manipulate or change any of the lakes. It's kind of like we got what we get what we got kind of thing.
Okay.
Um, but a lot of the lakes that have more inputs, it seems like that base of the food web is a little stronger. So you got the Hall River feeding Jordan and just pumping Jordan full of nutrients, and that just boosts that bottom of the food web up, and then that just cascades up the trophic system from there. And a lake like what would be just a low for the Piedmont's blessed with lakes that are pretty high fertility, but like if you compare it to like Norman, where Norman's not getting as much as some of our other lakes, and of course you got the whole Alabama bass issue there at Norman that's confounding, but also you got a little fewer nutrients. I think that would affect some of the fish from getting a little larger there at Norman.
I assume a lake like Blues Creek would be low in nutrients.
Probably. It's not in my district, so I can't speak to it too much, but it's probably not super high on the scale there from oligotrophic to eutrophic. It's probably more in the middle, like oligotrophic lake.
Yeah.
And then if you go out west, to the deep clear reservoirs, they're probably more lower on the oligotrophic scale.
Yeah, it seems like the deeper mountain lakes or, like a Philpott or a Blues or Smith Mountain Lake, they're deep, they're clear, it's predominantly a rock bottom or a hard bottom structure where the nutrients will get a chance to grow. So you're right. Luckily we have, Randleman and Townsend and, all the Raleigh area lakes, Jordan, Harris Falls, Kamak, McIntosh, they're all pretty fertile and they're all pretty high in nutrients. So
and fertility is not the end all be all. Like Norman would probably be a much better lake without all the Alabamas in it. But yeah, it would definitely.
So there's more than one variable, obviously,
to for sure.
make a good fishery.
Yeah, and Harris even. We're learning that Harris has got a lot of inputs coming into it, and that might have even been more of a driver for the hydrilla leaving because the water was getting so much more turbid. So the hydrilla was not solely because of the grass carp being put in there. The hydrilla was probably already on its way out with the water getting more dirty down there at Harris. So that was an they've seen.
Is all the hydrilla gone from Harris now? I know they had water willow and they had hydrilla.
Yeah.
It's pretty much gone now.
They do put a bunch of grass carp in there, so
okay.
Yeah.
And they do that for the boaters and for the people that water skiers, things like that.
And that lake in particular, that dam's built in a way where the hydrilla could have gotten right through it, no problem. And it could have gotten into the Cape Fear really easy from there. And hydrilla will actually choke out an entire river, bank to bank, the whole river. And we really didn't want it getting into the Cape Fear River and just having a river full of hydrilla downstream of Harris. That was a major concern there at Harris.
We saw it at Bugs.
Hydrilla is a federally noxious weed. It's listed, in the federal government as a noxious weed. So that all of the lake managers are federally mandated to manage against it. So
we saw it. Well, I saw the transform Bugs Island Lake and how quickly it spread there and how rapidly it took over Little Nutbush Creek and some of the calmer, more stagnant pockets up near the dam. It got in there. And I actually heard last weekend that Lake Norman is starting to get grass again. So I wonder how long it'll take to kill it. But
Norman's a little different. I think they stock grass carp pretty heavy at Norman. So it'll probably get eaten up pretty quick there at Norman, I imagine.
Hopefully, because my friend said that he caught them in the grass last weekend and the fish were fat and healthy and green and pretty and
Yeah.
didn't have sores all over it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Lake Norman, so they're going to kill it. I get it. But
Yeah.
so now that we're getting into, I don't think that we discussed this. Well, we did discuss it, but it wasn't recorded. Was how to keep the fish alive. A lot of our tournament anglers around here, we have an interest of fishing tournaments and keeping our fish alive. If you could just kind of go through what a tournament angler can do to kind of prepare either the night before to make sure that his live well environment will keep the fish alive.
Yeah, the biggest thing is temperature. Make sure you're not swinging the temperature and keeping it under 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So fill up your live well early in the morning with that cooler lake water and, right at launch. Fill it up full, get some ice in there if it's still pretty hot. You could even throw a floating pool thermometer in there, keep an eye on the temperature if you wanted to, and just keep it under 84. And keep an eye on it throughout the day and make sure it's not, getting way above 84, and then you got to throw a bunch of ice in there to cool it down. So if you're catching a lot of fish, maybe put a few handfuls of ice in there, every fish you catch or every hour or so. Make sure you're keeping it under 84, not swinging the temperature.
What are your thoughts on? I typically take Gatorade bottles, and because it's a thicker plastic, and when it bounces around, it won't leak, and I don't want to get that chlorinated water mixed in with the lake water. So I typically freeze, 4 or 5 big Gatorade bottles the night before, and then I'll throw one in, 2 in the morning when I catch my first couple fish so that it cools down. And then as the day goes on, I'll throw one on and keep my eye on the temperature. Is that something that you recommend doing?
Yeah, that could work real well. I think that'd be a great thing to do.
And then the additives, there's a million additives. There's G-Juice, there's Rejuvenate, there's, I know I've heard of people using ice cream salt or rock salt with no iodine in it. And you have to make sure that there's no iodine in it though, correct?
Yeah. And I think even our hatchery trucks, they just go to the feed store and buy that high grade livestock salt. Okay. And they'll do that in our hatchery tanks. And I think that's all they use is just salt.
And how much salt or how much rock salt? Just a handful every once in a while? I mean, what does that do to the fish? It just creates like a sleepy kind of feeling?
Yeah, just kind of acts as a pseudo sedative and calms them down, interacts with their gills and kind of slows oxygen consumption a little bit and just helps them stay calm and collected in the live well. And the fish will tell you what you need to do. If they're rolling on their sides and struggling a little bit, you might could put a little salt and ice in there and see if that brings them back around.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. So I've heard when you hook a fish in the gill and it's bleeding, you can actually take either a Mountain Dew, a Coca-Cola, or something that's carbonated and dump it down the fish's throat. And it makes the blood coagulate or something. And is that a rumor or is that true? Can you debunk or prove that?
Yeah, I think that's been proven that it's just washing most of the blood off.
Okay.
When you throw the fish in the live well water will wash it off and you just don't see it anymore.
So is there anything you can do if you do hook a fish in the gills?
Not much, yeah. If you're in a tournament, I'd use your best judgment as to whether you think that fish will survive and whether you want the penalty. But that's usually not a great place to hook them, and sometimes it can result in the fish dying.
Yeah, and a lot of these tournaments, they won't allow you to weigh a dead fish, or they won't allow you to weigh a dead fish for big fish. Yeah. Like we just fished Townsend a couple of weeks ago, and they, I get it, but you could weigh it in early if you wanted to. Now, does that fish have a better chance to survive if I let it go back in the lake, or if it's in my live well and oxygenated cooler water?
Oh, probably in your live well, better chance. Yeah. Still not a great chance if it's got like 2 trebles down there. But if you did broke one of the rakers or something, you'd be in real bad shape probably for that fish surviving. But
but the old Mountain Dew trick or the Pepsi trick, that's not going to work.
older room or someone started. I think you just walk away and then throwing it, and then the live well, and then the live well water takes care of that for you.
We were fishing last week, and I hooked one. This is why I'm asking. I hooked one in the gills, and my buddy was like, "Well, do you have a Mountain Dew or anything in here?" I'm like, "No, I got a Monster Energy
Yeah.
drink." I mean, what's the difference, right? I mean, it's carbonated sugar water,
Yeah.
so if I dump it on it, it should coagulate, and the fish should live, right? Now it died like 3 minutes later.
Yeah, I think you're just washing the blood off is all you're doing.
All right.
And it's also not the end of the world if we kill a few bass these days, right? Because no one's keeping fish to eat anymore, bass, especially largemouth and spots and stuff. So if we're killing a few in a tournament here and there, it's just making up for those fish that aren't leaving the lake these days.
Now, I have heard, we can kind of jump to this, but I do want to talk about something else first, which is fizzing fish.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that technique. A lot of fishermen will either, they'll take a hypodermic needle, a heavy gauge hypodermic needle, and they'll either go through the side or, and just to deflate the air bladder. If a fish comes up too quick, its air bladder doesn't have time to deflate and it can't get back down. So especially in the wintertime when you're fishing deep, you're catching spotted bass super deep, you got to fizz all those fish. Is it better to go through the mouth or through the side? I go through the mouth. But I've heard people to tell me not to do that, to go through the side. Is there a big difference?
Yeah, you could hit the heart or some of the other organs if you go through the mouth the wrong way, and you're using too long of a needle. So going through the side, just laying that fin down and counting about 2 or 3 scales and going in right there's the safer way to not hit any other organs.
Okay.
Because that'll keep probably, as long as you use that fin, that line, you lay that pectoral fin down and just follow that line, all the organs are going to be above that line usually.
Okay, so if you lay the pectoral fin down, do you want to count 2 or 3 scales towards the tail?
Yeah, two to 4.
And then you want to go in how deep? Obviously, it depends on how big the fish is, but you want to just barely get underneath the skin.
If you do it right, you'll hear like a pop and a little bit of air of the needle, and that's how you're doing it right.
Okay.
And fish that are just rolling on their sides, those probably don't need to be fizzed. If they're totally like belly up, can't move their tail, just totally immobile in the live well, that's when you need to fizz them. Okay. If they're just rolling and kind of righting themselves and then rolling, might be more stress than needing to fizz them. Okay. The fish that need to be fizzed are totally like, immobilized by the swim bladder being so inflated. Yeah. So they can't hardly at all.
I gotcha.
That's important to remember, because sometimes you can confuse stress for the need to fizz.
So can you kind of talk about the differences?
Yeah.
And what we should look for?
The best rule of thumb is just the water you catch them out of. If it's 28 to 29 foot or deeper, that's when you're getting into that fizzing realm. Okay. I think an atmosphere. So 28 to 30 feet is about 1 atmosphere more pressure than the surface. And that's usually when you get into that issue. So if you're fishing shallower than 20, odds are there's no need to fizz one you catch shallower than 20.
Okay. But a stressed fish will still kind of look like it needs to be fizzed, and it'll lay on its side.
Put them in the live well, and if like you can still see their operculum and still see their fins on the side and their dorsal fins, that's not a need to fizz them. If they're totally belly up and they're still swimming around but they're belly up not rolling, that you need to fizz them, because they can't turn that belly back around. Okay. But if they pull their whole body around and just right themselves every now and again, they're probably just stressed out more from the fight than anything. Okay.
What do we do about stressed fish?
Just live well care. Don't let your temperature swing too much. Whatever temp you put them in there at, don't try to swing it from there. So just keep them in a stable environment for the rest of the day, and then hope they do well. But also not too worried about a few fish dying. I know tournament fishermen are worried about the dead fish penalties, but from a fish management perspective, we're not pretty much any of our lakes, we're not worried about a few bass dying here and there.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it seems like obviously more and more tournament fishermen, they want to protect a resource. So guys are way more conscious about it. You just don't see guys walking around with, a plastic bag with barely any water and it walking up to the scales anymore. Everybody's very conscious about,
that's right. Yeah, I think
conservation and trying to take care of the fisheries. And obviously there's exceptions, and like you mentioned last week, that it's actually good for certain lakes to have some sort of attrition, because as younger fish are born and hatched, and as they go through their life cycles, you want to kind of call out the ones that you got to call some out. But you want to keep the spawners, like the 4 or 5 pounders. Those are the ones that you really want to take extra good care of.
I want to leave those big fish in the lake and keep them as healthy as we can, but it's definitely not the end of the world for sure to kill if you kill a few or lose a few here and there.
So what do we got to look forward to over the next 6 to 8 months? What are you working on? What are you going to be working on? Are there any programs that you have coming up where you could use some tournament fishermen, or at least tournament fishermen input?
Not yet, not until next summer. So summer's usually our big season for all that, when we do all our vegetation work and our fish attractor work in summer. So selecting sites for that and areas for that. Most of your district biologists over the next, from September into January, February, will just be doing our resident fish surveys for other species. So we'll be doing our crappie surveys at a lot of our lakes for trap nets and looking at our crappie populations. And then we'll be doing our maronid surveys for our striped bass and hybrid striped bass through the winter.
And do you do that through electroshocking?
And then we'll do that in the spring again. So we do all that in the spring from March through April and May. Yeah.
Okay.
That's usually our annual cycle.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can ride along or ride beside you, or but I would love to see how that's done and tape that and kind of go through the process of what you look for, how you assess which waterways you're going to electroshock, and kind of how your surveys go and what your process is A to Z. I mean, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we could do that for sure. That'll be as early as March. Any of our lakes that have a heated effluent, we can get in March. We try to get the bass when they're spawning or getting ready to spawn. So March, April is our prime time for shocking for largemouth.
And you said you can shock up to 4 feet, 5 feet?
Yeah, 6 feet.
6 feet?
If it's clear enough and you can see them down that deep. Our nets are about 12 feet long. So if we can see 4 to 6 feet, we can get them in that depth. But, most of our lakes in D5, we can see about 1 to 2 feet. So that's about the depth that we can see them and nab them at.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
But it probably goes down 10, 12 feet, but we just can't see them that deep if they are getting hit. Okay. So we try to they're in that top 4 feet of the water column when we go out to get some in the boat.
Okay. I heard spotted.
Go ahead. You'll be surprised how many bass you see when we do that.
I can see them on live scope, buddy. I can pan over and see them all on live scope and watch them not eat my lures. I can't imagine doing electroshock because I know I can't see all of them with live scope. I'm sure there's plenty that are out there that would make me go crazy, but you think the fish aren't there, but they most certainly are there. They just don't want anything to do with you.
Exactly.
So I do want to talk a little bit about spotted bass because they are becoming a bigger problem in certain lakes around here. You mentioned Norman, Blues, Gaston. Now they're starting to get into Bugs Island Lake, and obviously certain lakes are basically tailor-made for spotted bass because they're sight feeders. So they hunt in groups. What's really cool is you can actually see it on live scope. I mean, you can see them working together and herding the bait together as a group. And you can see them up shallow too. They'll do that. They roam in wolf packs and they attack, and it's pretty crazy. But Right now, there's no limit on spotted bass, right? You can take
That's
as
correct.
many Alabama spotted bass as you want to out of any fishery across the state of North Carolina, correct?
Yeah. And I think we'd have to check about bugs out. I'm not sure how Virginia feels about that. I'm sure they share our sentiment, but I don't know if their law is that way yet. They're in Virginia. So Bugs Island and Wiley would be your only two that necessarily won't hold true. The border lakes,
I got you.
all inland lakes, all landlocked North Carolina lakes, you can take as many as you want out of the lake.
I got you. And we're talking about
you don't have smallmouth.
Yeah.
If it's got a patch on the tongue, you can take it home. Smallmouth can confound that issue, but
so is that the best way to tell if it's an Alabama spot, is to put your finger on its tongue? If it's got teeth, it's an Alabama spotted bass.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but I've never had that confirmed by a biologist before.
And they're hybridizing so much with Kentucky spots now that like they'll be crazy looking fish with tooth patches, no tooth patches, all kinds of stuff out there these days.
And hybridizing with largemouths too.
Here and there, not as much largemouth as the smallmouth. The smallmouth's the one we're really worried about in some of those lakes. They're getting hybridized out almost completely now and swamped out.
What lakes? I'm assuming you're talking about Lake James.
James is the biggest one that we're looking into, or not me in particular, but our mountain. We'll be really looking into James and how that's going to play out at James. We're really looking into that over the next few years. But unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to document it as it see what happens. Because once they're there, we've learned that it's just no putting it into it. They're just there.
Yeah. So the one positive that I did hear is that the Alabama spotted bass, when eaten in the wintertime, is one of the most tasty freshwater fish in existence. The meat is really, really white, and I guess they're just they taste better than like a largemouth or a smallmouth bass, because I've had bass before and it's just not good. It's really fishy and grassy tasting, and I guess spotted bass are just, they have more of a firmer meat, almost like a striper.
And they're swimming in usually more clear water, so they're not getting all that dirt and stuff around them that could.
That's nutrients, you said.
Yeah, all the so they'll have a little cleaner water to be in, and they won't be as dirty.
I got you.
And actually, even if we harvest them, it might not get rid of them, but it might bring that average size up. So that'll be great for tournament fishing at lakes like Norman and Gaston, where if you harvest a bunch of those critters, then the average size of the ones in the lake will be a little bit bigger, and that'll result in bigger tournament bags.
Yeah, I know personally, well, I know from experience that Blues Creek is definitely one of the lakes that is completely overrun with those things, and we continue to catch and release them, and we need to start harvesting some of those fish. I don't eat them, but I know now that all the black bears have moved into the area, maybe I can throw them up in the woods and the black bears will eat them. I don't know. Something will eat them. Turtles.
If you got a garden, take them home to the garden. Just put them in the garden, bury them in the garden. That's a good thing to do.
Fertilizer.
I think some homeless shelters and places like that will accept fish if you clean them, and you still don't want the meat, then they'll accept the fillets at some of the homeless shelters and places like that. But they don't want to clean the fish, so you'd have to clean them for them.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea too.
Yeah,
it's a real good idea.
Yeah.
So I know that have they started popping up anywhere else? I know that Gaston, they're starting to pop up in Bugs. They've overtaken Blues, Norman, the whole. I haven't seen them in the Yadkin chain yet. But I'm not sure. Have they shown up at all in any of the Greensboro area lakes or some of the Burlington area lakes? Or
no, we haven't seen them in my district, District 5 yet. Or in District 6 outside of Tillery. Tillery is the only lake down there in the Yadkin chain that we're aware of where we've had some positive IDs. So the Yadkin is one we're kind of worried about now that Tillery's been positively identified.
Painted.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Those lakes are a little dirtier, so they might not like those lakes as much. and they might not do what they did in some of the other lakes. We're just going to watch and see how that dynamic plays out in those.
But they haven't showed up in High Rock or Baden. Baden's the one that I'm afraid of, because Baden's deep, it's clear.
Yeah.
It could, if they get in there, they could do a lot of damage to that lake.
Yeah, you could always just compare it to Norman and know if you get in a certain lake and it's similar to Norman, it's going to go the Norman way.
Yeah, exactly. And it happens fast.
Yeah, 12 years, I think, is what we've seen in South Carolina, where you get about 12 years of some of those fish getting to 4 to 5 pounds. But then after that, well, couple generations, usually 6 to 7 years for a generation. Once you get 2 generations of Alabama bass in the lake, then they can really start rolling.
Yeah.
That's when they start to compete with each other. And that's when they shrink up, is when they compete with themselves, because they outcompete everything at first.
Yeah.
And then for themselves, and that's when they shrink down.
And I have noticed that in the Blues Creek, now that the grass is growing and that there's a little bit of shoreline cover, because there's not a lot of habitat for largemouth in that lake because it's so deep and clear. There's a bunch of laydowns and stuff, and they can eat brim all they want to. But with the introduction of that grass, there's always been grass, but now it's really starting to take over, and it's really grabbed hold, and there's a bunch of that water willow back there. And what I'm starting to see now is I'm starting to see 8 to 12 inch largemouth bass, which I have not seen in the last 5 to 10 years. And that was really what I was worried about was, guys, we're not catching a little bass. All we're catching is, if we catch a largemouth, it's usually 3 pounds plus. And then the spots are anywhere between a pound, under a pound, to, the biggest spot that you typically see is 3.5. I did catch a 4.5 there, but I suspect that was a Kentucky, because I don't think Alabamas get that big, purebred Alabamas. But what I'm starting to see now is I'm starting to see a lot more juvenile largemouth bass, which is reassuring, that as long as we keep letting that grass grow and let those fish reproduce, that they'll do so naturally and everything. That there's a ton of habitat for largemouth in Blues Creek, but at least there's some where they should be able to reproduce, and hopefully their numbers will go up a little bit.
Yeah. And is that water willow there in Blues?
It's like that. The best thing I can compare it to is that Baden grass. Is that water willow?
Water willow.
Willow. Yeah, it's that sticky stuff. It only grows out to about maybe 2.5 feet, but it's like little sticks that grow up.
I could confirm the next time we talk, but I think we may have planted that there. That's not in my district, so I'm not super in tune with what's going on there at Blues, but I think we did have some projects there a few years ago.
But right now you're working on Mycko and adding water willow to Mycko.
So each district's responsible for whatever they would like to do within their district, and I'm responsible for Mycko. Mycko, Mayo, and Jordan are my biggest 3, and I'm doing 3 lakes at a time. So I've got Townsend, Oak Hollow, and Mycko going right now. Hopefully get plants established there where we don't have to touch them year after year after year, and then I can move one lake to another and add another one to the group of 3.
Now, I noticed last year they lowered the water level at Oak Hollow for some reason to work on something, and they lowered it during I don't know, it was like March or April when the fish were spawning, and that grass was just starting to really take a hold and really starting to flourish. And then they lowered the lake for some reason for what I don't know, repair something or whatever they had the reason for. But I've noticed that it started to die. And then this year they kept the water level high, and now it's starting to come back, and it's starting to reproduce, and it's starting to expand a little bit. So hopefully that will continue at Oak Hollow, because I know that the fish use it. I know that the bait uses it. I've seen it. And it really seems to be helping that fishery.
Yeah, the best thing to do is to look for our signs around that water willow. Anywhere we don't have a sign, typically we haven't planted water willow there, so it's been spreading on its own, and it's starting to just naturally spread throughout the lake there, and it's taken about 10-11 years to get to that point.
Do you know, I know it's been in there forever, probably before you even thought about being a fisheries biologist, but Lake Brant and Lake Higgins, they have lily pads, like massive flats of lily pads. Like, how did that happen?
And that is it. Lily pads are spatter dock.
I
The leaf is more of a heart shape, and it kind of sticks out of the water, doesn't float as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's spatter dock, and it's a native. You know, it's always been in our rivers and creeks for decades and decades. It's
So
just a
was
native.
that what that was done? You guys introduced that, and
No, no,
no,
not
that's
not
natural.
probably there when they flooded it, and it just took off.
Okay.
And it prefers that real mucky bottom, real shallow mucky bottom. It's an emergent species, so it's not going to grow very deep like a true lily would.
Okay.
Or water lily will get in about 6 to 8 feet. That one will probably get into about 3 to 4. It's as deep as you'll ever see it.
Have we ever tried lilies anywhere?
So we're doing it at Oak Hollow, and I'm trying it at Mycko here and there.
Is that what the turtles are eating?
Yeah, that's what the turtles are eating. That eelgrass. The two species that bass fishermen want, the turtles love too. So
yeah.
it's a clash for me.
Yeah.
But we're still trying it every year. We probably plant about 200 pots worth of each species, and if we can get 20% of those to survive every year, hopefully it'll compound over time.
All right. Well, that's all I got for this time. Why don't we plan on doing this again once a quarter if that's good with you, and we can kind of sync up, and as Brad and I go through, we'll keep jotting down notes and questions to ask, and we'll ask some of our listeners if they have questions. We can do a Q&A, and if there's anything that you need to get out there publicly, we can get out there for you, kind of help each other out.
We could do these genetics and all these stuff we're learning about where we have Florida genes and where we don't have Florida genes, and all that will hopefully, in the next several months, really have a line on our statewide genetics for largemouth. And
cool.
We could really discuss some of that next time.
Yeah, that would be, I'm sure a lot of guys would find a lot of interest in that.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I've noticed, like, when I catch a fish now, I'm looking at it and I'm looking at like some of the different characteristics, and some of them have like I noticed last weekend, some of them have a very distinct black dot right on their gill plate, almost like a brim, like that. And then they're more solid colored, and then some are more splotchy, and some are, so I'm starting to pay more attention to that.
Yeah. Some of that is, how much sunlight they're exposed to, but there might be some genetics at play there.
Yeah.
But we're fin clipping at just about every lake we go to now. We're really getting a line on what's out there and what's not.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Seth, I appreciate it. I appreciate you doing this for a second time. I've taken up enough of your time for this week and next week, but if there's anything that we can do for you, let us know. And we certainly appreciate you dedicating your time and creating this awareness and getting the information out to the fishermen, because, we rely on you guys, and I know that you need help. So, we'll help any way we can.
Yeah. And anybody out there, if they want to email me, it's just Seth.Mycko, MYCKO @ncwildlife.org. And
do you mind if I put that out there on?
No, I don't mind. Yeah, okay. No problem.
Yeah, I'll publish that and put that on the tag so that people can click on that and email you any questions that they may have. Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right, Seth. Well, we appreciate it. We'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
See ya.
Bye-bye. All right. That was Seth Mycko, fisheries biologist with North Carolina Wildlife Resources. There was one thing that I wanted to mention. The new Garmin XR came out, and I'm going to be testing that tomorrow, so I'll have a video on my YouTube page, hopefully tomorrow afternoon, probably tomorrow afternoon or Thursday morning. I should have it out, but check it out. It's pretty cool. It's a super extended range, shoots out to 300 feet. I tested it about 30 days ago, and it was pretty impressive. It's still clear, but it has that extended range. So I'm going to mess around with it tomorrow, and I'll get some good videos shot of it, and you guys can check it out. But that's all for now. Hopefully we'll get Brad back next week, and we can resume our normal routine. Thanks, guys.